Okay, so I'm also recording this class as well. So what we did last week, we went through our present active indicative forms, our present middle passive indicative forms, as well as the future active and the future middle, okay? And so some of this stuff is initial review, but I also feel that I need to explain myself on certain particular things more in detail, which this is this presentation will get into. So yeah, so let us begin. So in regards to the verb moods, we're going to finish the indicative today. We're going to get into participles, infinitives, imperatives, and we're not going to go through the subjunctive. I just think we don't have the time to do subjunctive. I'm really pushing it with the imperatives as well, but we'll see. We'll see, Lord willing, okay? Now, you'll notice also here, you guys, that the participle and the infinitives, you'll notice that these two right here, they're italicized, aren't they? The reason why I italicized them is because, technically speaking, they're not moods. They're not moods. And I'll explain more what participles and infinitives are, but they're known as a verbal adjective. That's what the participle is. And then also verbal nouns. That's what the infinitive is. And so it's basically a verb doing something else. That's what the participle and the infinitive are, excuse me. And so I'll explain more what those two are. And the reason why I want to mention them and show them to you guys first, compared to the imperative and subjunctive, is because we see more participles and infinitives in comparison to imperative and subjunctive. Okay, so in regards to recognition, when you open the New Testament, they will happen more often than the imperative and subjunctive. Okay, so yeah, let's continue on. And let's talk about the verb moods and aspects. Now, I know that there was some confusion in regards with the present active indicative, and so this is why I want to bring that up. But verb moods and aspects. The progressive and perfect aspects. The progressive and perfect aspects. What is the progressive? Progressive is continual action. Perfect is action that occurred in the past that is still happening right now. So one of the examples for the perfect aspect is I have been saved since 1998, right? And so so the whole idea of that action of salvation, or that act of being saved, occurred in the past, but that experience of being saved is still experienced now by the subject, okay? So that is perfect. But the reason why I want to bring this up is this. Progressive and perfect aspects. They have the middle and passive forms identical. Remember how I showed you the present middle passive form? And how I told you that the middle voice and the passive voice are the same? This is the reason why. Is because the aspect, for some reason, wants them to be the same. Okay, so whenever we have a progressive aspect verb or a progressive aspect action, the middle and passive forms, the middle and passive voice, their forms will be identical. Okay, the difference is the aorist. The aorist aspect, each voice has a distinct form. Okay, so you'll have an aorist active voice form, an aorist middle voice form, and an aorist passive voice form. Okay, so those are the differences. Progressive and perfect, you will have the middle and passive that are identical, and then the aorist, you will have, for each of the three voices, they will be different. Each of them will be different. Okay, continuing on. So we're going to continue on with the indicative mood. All right, and so here are the tenses of the indicative mood. You don't have to write them right now, but for the sake of maybe trying to win the race, maybe like you'll wonder while we're in the middle of it, man, how many more tenses do we have to learn? So you can cross it out in a list. But like I said, you don't have to write them out now because I'll go through them and I'll show you what I want to teach you guys for each and every tense. But here are the tenses, all right? Here's the tenses. So last week, we went through the present active and the present middle passive, okay? And we also went to the future active and the future middle, all right? So those were the 4 different forms that we went through last week, okay? There's something that I need to teach you guys with the future active. There's a certain behavior, especially with that sigma at the end of a verb, okay? But today, hopefully, we'll go through the imperfect. We'll go through the imperfect middle passive. I'm going to teach you guys what the aorists are, okay? And then finally, the aorist passive, the future passive, the perfect active. And I probably won't do the middle passive, okay, just for the sake of time, all right? So those are the following those are the following tenses within the indicative mood that I'm going to show you, okay? So it's going to be very note intensive this week. Well, it has been every week, but this one especially. But just a tip for you guys, rely on this presentation heavily when I post it on Smoodle for your guys' test, and also the recording, because I don't actually have the examples on the presentation. I have it on a separate sheet of paper or on a separate digital sheet of paper. So please, please, please rely heavily on your notes as well as the recording and this presentation. Okay, so let's talk about first the present active. I know that there was confusion about aspects, so I'm going to reattempt to explain that again. Okay, so let's talk about the present active and aspect. Unfortunately, the present active indicative form, this form is vague in regards to aspect. It's vague. The Greeks, from what we know for sure with the New Testament, the Greeks do not have a distinction of finding out what the aspect of the present active indicative form is, okay? So that being said, it could be either progressive or aorist. It could be either progressive or aorist in aspect, okay? And so I know that this was difficult for me to explain last week, but basically this is what the behavior of the present active indicative is. It could be both. It really could be. It just depends on the translator, how they wish to translate the aspect of the present active indicative. Most often than not, translators will translate it in the aorist form or in the aorist translation, okay? So most translators, I including myself, would translate it like an aorist, suggesting or meaning as so. So graphe is a Greek word. Of course it's Greek, but graphe is the Greek word for to write, like I'm writing something, okay? It's the present active indicative third singular form, okay, graphe, all right? So grapho means I write, all right? So graphe here is he, she, or it writes, okay? And so you can, like I said, you can either translate it as a progressive, which is she is writing, this continual act of writing in the present time, or, like I said, you can translate it as an aorist, she writes. Both are equal in correction, in being correct. Both are correct. But yes, go ahead.
So you would say in the progressive form, would you say graphe?
Yes, exactly. You would say graphe. Okay. You would say graphe. But in the aorist, you would also say graphe. Unfortunately, the Greeks don't tell us which one is which. We don't know if it's a progressive. We don't know if it's an aorist. So the choice is up to the translator. That's the concern here. Okay. So
Okay.
if you wish to translate it as a progressive, you can translate it as she is writing. Or if you wish to translate it as an aorist, which I do, she can translate it as she writes. Okay? Questions about that?
That shows like the present tense of that verb, and then the past tense would that is that grapho to like our ed to a word?
No. Grapho is still a present active. I haven't showed you guys the past tenses yet, and we'll get to that though afterward. But if it was a past tense form, Josh, we would translate it with an ed. So she, well, not here with this word particularly, but she wrote
Right.
or she was writing. So yes, very good,
Okay.
exactly.
Cool.
So okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So that's the present active indicative form. Like I said, one more time, we don't know if it's progressive or aorist. It could be both. It could be both. It just depends on your choice as a translator. All right. So let's continue on then. Okay. So like I said, we went through the present active indicative. We went to the present middle passive indicative. Let me do some review for the future tense. Okay? So the future tense. Like I said before, the biggest clue is the tense suffix sigma between the stem and the noun ending. Okay? So before the noun ending, you got the sigma, right? And that sigma is attached after the noun, or excuse me, not the noun stem, after the verb stem. Okay, so that is our biggest clue. That's sigma. That's sigma. If you see a sigma between the verb stem and then the verb ending, that will let you know that this is a future tense. Okay, the future active, again, very simple. You have your verb stem, then you add that tense suffix, which is that sigma, and then all it is for the future active is the present active indicative endings. That's all it is. Okay, super easy. So if you know the present active indicative endings, you know the future active. All you need is to add that sigma. Same thing with the future middle. The stem plus the sigma plus the present middle passive indicative endings. And that MP, you guys, that MP, that means middle passive. Middle passive. Okay, shorthand. All right? Okay, now, because of that sigma, though, because of that sigma and that certain consonants, that behave with that sigma. For example, those stop consonants, because of that tense suffix sigma, the stop consonants will change. And that's what I want to show you before we continue on into the past tenses. Okay? So remember how this is the reason why the third declension is such a horrible declension, why I don't like the third declension. I think it's a bully, you know. It's because that sigma with certain consonants changes it. That's the same thing here. It happens here as well with the verbs. But with the verbs, they're a little more obvious, in my opinion. So I'll show you some examples of that right now. Okay? So let me move to our sheet. So escape. Okay. So let me just prepare this right now. Okay, so the word that I'm going to use for our examples of what I just mentioned, the last thing that I mentioned about the consonant stops and so forth, is blepo. Beta, oh dear. Beta, and that's a B. Beta, lambda, epsilon, pi, omega. Blepo, okay? And I'm not sure if I used blepo for our last week, but If I didn't, what it means is to see, blepo, to see, or I see specifically. I see, okay? And also, let me remind once again, the lexical form is always the present active indicative first singular form of a word, okay, of a verb, all right? So this is our lexical form of this word, blepo, okay, to see. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question now, and here's the question. What is the stem of this verb? And please raise your hand via webinar if you have the answer. Someone from North Texas has the answer, all right? So specifically Patricia, I believe, has the answer. So yes, Patricia, go ahead. Who said it? It wasn't Patricia, unless Patricia has a throat issue. It sounded more like a gentleman that said it. So say it one more time.
Well, he was saying bless. I actually had a question.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that person who said blep, way to go. I give you a thumbs up. That's exactly right. Beta, lambda, epsilon, pi is our stem. Okay? Now, what is your question, Patricia?
The stem is what again?
The stem is beta, lambda, epsilon, pi. That is the stem. Okay. That's correct.
Whatever. I don't know. She's asking the ways.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Go ahead.
Always non.
Oh, okay. So the lexical form for verbs will always be the present active indicative first person singular form.
First person singular and first person singular. Then you could type it.
Present active what?
First person singular.
Present active indicative first person singular.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so blep is our stem. Blep is our stem here, okay? And so I'm going to copy and paste the stem in every box, okay? As so, all right? Now, don't write this down yet. I should have warned you guys. I'm sorry. Don't write this down. I want to show you guys what this consonantial changes occurred, okay? So, like I said, this is the future active indicative ending. Excuse me. These are the future active indicative, right? That being said, I need to add a sigma at the end of this stem here, right? So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay? The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the present active indicative endings because that's what the future is. So let me do that right now. Okay, so like I said, don't write anything yet, but here's what's happening, all right? So pi or p, it is a labial consonant, Remember, there's the labials, the velars, and the dentals. And so p or pi is a labial, all right? And next to this labial consonant is a sigma, all right? So what happens is, just like I showed you with the third declension, those two form a consonant together. They become one consonant, okay? Does anyone want to take a guess what that consonant may be? When we have a labial consonant with the sigma, it becomes a Go for it. Someone from North Texas. A PC. Very good. Exactly. Exactly. So that's, oopsies. That's what I'm going to add as so. Okay? So whenever there's the pi sigma here, I am going to replace it with a PC. Okay? And so we have here the pronunciation blepso, blepses, blepse, blepsamen, blepsete, blepsusi. Okay? So this is, now if you wish to write this down, go ahead. If you wish to write this down, go ahead. But this is what occurs with the future active and the future middle passive because of that sigma. Any questions? All right, may I continue on? Not yet? Okay. All right. How about now? Yes, no? Okay. So the next example is a dental example, okay? So instead of blepo, I'm going to use patho. That is pi, epsilon, iota, theta, omega. Patho, okay? Now, patho in English is I persuade. I persuade. Okay? That's patho. So, question. What is the stem for patho? What do you think our stem for patho is? Leanne, go ahead, Leanne.
Is it pay?
Exactly. There you go. It's path. Very good. So this is our stem. That is our stem. Okay? So as usual, I'm going to add that stem to every box. All right? And like I said, don't write anything down yet. Unless you know how it's going to behave, don't write anything down yet until we actually do the change. All right? And now I'm going to do the future active part, right? I'm going to add the sigma, and that's an S, so I apologize for that. Sigma. And then I'm going to add their endings. Okay, so this here, this theta is a dental. It is a dental. How do dentals behave when they are next to a sigma? How do the dentals behave? Raise your hand if you think you have the answer. All right, go for it, North Texas.
They run away.
Ah, very good. That's exactly right. They run away. They get scared by the sigma. Excellent. So, in this case, that theta disappears. And this is our future active indicative form for the verb patho. So even though it doesn't look like it, that's what it is. That's what it is in the future active indicative. Peso, peses, pese, pesamen, pesete, pesusi. I will persuade. You will persuade. We will persuade. So that's how that behaves. So keep those in mind. The consonant stops. Heavily influenced here. They affect the way that a word looks like because of that sigma with the future. Okay? Any questions?
Professor,
Yes.
can you, okay, I understand about the dental and what happens, but it goes a little fast for me understanding how you got the first endings anyway. You know what I'm trying to.
The first endings?
How you told us don't copy anything down because, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Could you re-explain that? I know you've already.
Sure. So basically, let me add the theta again. Okay. So this here, and let me highlight it for you guys. That is our stem, right? That is the stem right there. It ends with a theta, okay? And that theta is a dental consonant. Right? Okay. This sigma here, and I'm going to put a different color on that one. We're going to make it pink, okay? That sigma lets us know that this is a future form. It is a future form, okay? And you see that in all the other forms, right? And then finally, that omega, as well as the ace, a, amen, ete, usi, all those are the present active indicative endings, okay? So I'll put another color there. I like green, so boom, we have green, okay? So that's what we're having prior to the change. That's what everything's occurring. That's what it looks like behind the scenes, if you will. This is everything before the change, right? Now, because of this theta is a dental, because it's a dental, it doesn't like the sigma. It's scared of the sigma, so it runs away, right? That's why that theta disappears in all the forms. Because when it's with that sigma, it drops. It just disappears. It goes away. Okay? Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I was just a little lost for a minute, but I'm found now.
Good. Amen. Okay? And
Professor.
yes. Joseph.
Sir, could you just for the nose and the help out, can you put on there the how you explain that? I will, we will, they will, or
Oh, sure. So,
I don't see that.
do you want me to write it down or do you want me to say it?
You can just say it.
Okay, so this one here is I will persuade. This one here is you will persuade. Here is he, she, it, or Charles Barkley will persuade. Okay, here is the plural. So the first person plural is we will persuade. Pesete is you all will persuade. Y'all, right? Y'all, very good. And pesusi is they will persuade, or the SUM students will persuade, or the teachers will persuade.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Okay, may I continue? May I continue on now? All right. So let's go back to our presentation, or my presentation. Now, in the indicative, we're venturing into the past tenses. The past tenses, okay? Excuse me. In the indicative mood, there are technically two past tenses, okay? We have two different past tenses in the indicative mood. They are known as the imperfect tense and the aorist tense. Okay, one more time. They are the imperfect and the aorist tenses. Those two tenses are the past tenses in the indicative mood. Okay. Now, someone might be asking, well, what's the difference? What is the difference between the imperfect and aorist? And I'm really glad that you asked that question. The difference is aspect. The difference is aspect. Okay. So the imperfect is the progressive past. The imperfect tense is the progressive past. So when you translate it, it will be I was writing. Okay? That is the imperfect tense. And the aorist, well, it's basically the aorist past. The name of it is the aspect itself. It is the aorist past, or it just simply happened in the past. So it is I wrote. I wrote. All right, and I'll show you guys these forms via example, okay? But there's two other things I definitely want to let you guys know. And did someone have their hand up?
Professor?
Yes.
So the aorist, can it ever be defined as progressive past as well?
No, the aorist is never progressive past. So very good question. Never, ever, ever, not in one bit will ever be the progressive past. It is the undefined action. It just simply happened. That's all we can say about the aorist, and nothing more. And so that's what I wanted to mention too. For the aorist now, the aorist specifically, there's two kinds of aorists. They're known as the first and second aorist. The first and second aorist. Okay, which again I'll show you, and I'll let you guys know what the difference between the first and second aorist is when we get there. Okay, but the biggest clue for the past tenses, so this is both the imperfect as well as the aorist. Okay, so it's the same for both. The biggest clue for both of them is the augment in front of the sem. That's what it's called, you guys. Okay, so there's this thing known as an augment. Okay. And that is always in front of the stem, the verb stem. Okay, so the biggest clue here for the past tense, if you see this augment in front of the verb stem, that is your clue that this is a past tense. Okay? All right. So I'm going to show you guys now the imperfect active and the imperfect middle passive forms now. All right? And then we'll get into the aorist. All right, so let's go back to our chart, all right? And we're going to use our buddy again, Luo, lambda, upsilon, omega, Luo, and that's too small. I don't like it that small. We're going to make it bigger, and we're also going to do my favorite font, Luo, which, by the way, means to loose or destroy, okay? So let's start off with the stem. Let's start off with the stem. And the stem, as always, is lambda upsilon, okay? So I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste, all right, as so, and then that I must eliminate, no fill, okay? So lambda upsilon, that is our stem. And I'll take just a few seconds for you guys to write all that. All right. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the augment to this form. Okay, like I said, whether it's the imperfect or the aorist, it will always have this augment, especially only in the indicative, I should say. And only in the indicative, you have this augment. So this gives us the clue that it is a past action, okay? And this is the augment, all right? It is simply an epsilon in front of the stem. Okay? So I want you guys to add the epsilon in front of the stem. All right. Once you do that, now I'll show you guys the endings. All right. So for the first person singular, it is Omicron nu. Omicron nu. All right. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to go in order as I usually do. I'm going to go to the next one because it's kind of important to recognize this. I'm going to go to the third person plural. I'm going to go to the third person plural. Why? Because the third person plural is also Omicron nu. All right? So write down somewhere in your notes right now that in the imperfect active indicative form, or that tense, the first person singular is identical to the third person plural. Okay? The first person singular is identical to the third person plural.
Professor?
Yes, sir.
Why are they
Like
identical?
on a test, if you were to provide that.
I'm sorry, say that again? I think that was Michael. Can you say that one more time, Mike?
So if you were to give us that word,
Yeah.
and either we wrote first person singular or third person plural, we'd be right either way.
Exactly. You'd be right either way. Okay? Now, Josh, you had a question as well?
I was just asking why they're similar.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a philosophy to it, or there's a history to it. Basically, for me, when I was a Greek student, my conclusion was this, that 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, the Greek writers thought of students now to just screw them up and say, yeah, we just really want to make their lives miserable. And so I really have no idea why it's similar. So, but there must be a really good philosophical PhD answer out there, and I just don't have it. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So just in a test, either one's fine. Either one's right. If I give you this form. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. So then now let me go to the order, and let me do the second singular, okay? So the second singular is Omicron Upsilon. Elu'u. Oh, no, I got this mixed up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I could just erase what I just said. It's not Elu'u. That's the next one. It's Epsilon Sigma, Elu-S. I am so sorry about that. Okay, and then the third is just epsilon. Okay, now the plural first and the plural second, the ending is the same as the present active indicative. So this one is Omicron mu, epsilon nu, eluamin, and then the second is eluate. All right. So I'm sorry, did someone say something?
Professor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. How would we know that the epsilon, what did you call it?
The augment.
How do we know, like if we just see a word to us that just starts with an epsilon?
Right. And there are some out there that do start with an epsilon. So one is, again, just based on the vocabulary that I provided for you thus far, just know those words, and if it ever comes up in a test, I'll bring it up to let you know, oh yeah, by the way, this verb starts with an epsilon, so see what happens. But if it wasn't imperfect, I'm going to show you the next examples of what happens when you have that augment in front of it. Okay, so there's a couple things. So let me just reword everything that I said. When there's an epsilon in front of a word, we need to understand that when there's an ending as these endings specifically, know that these endings specifically are for the present active indicative for some of them, but majority of them is for the imperfect active, okay? As long as we know that it's the imperfect and we see that epsilon in front of it, that's an augment. That's not part of the verb. It has to be an augment, okay? I'm going to show you guys next what happens when you actually have an epsilon that starts the verb, okay? So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay? So now, before I do that, though, let me just tell you, I'm going to read them out. And for the sake of time, just read them out on your own. I'm not going to wait for you guys, but just listen to me. And then I'll also give you the translations of it. So it's eluon, elues, elue, eluamin, eluate, eluon. Okay? So eluon is I was destroying. I was destroying. And then elues, you were destroying. Elue, he, she, it, or Charles Barkley was destroying. Eluamin, we were destroying. Eluate, y'all were destroying. Eluon, they were destroying. Okay? So that's how you translate it in the imperfect. Okay?
So Baltimore was Eluon, the city?
There was certain folks that were a Luon in the city. So, good contemporary example. Anyways, let's continue on. Now, let me show you what happens when you actually have a verb that begins with an epsilon for the imperfect. Okay, so I'm going to skip luo right now. Okay, and then I'm going to go and use another word, and that's epsilon chi omega. Epsilon chi omega. Okay? And epsilon chi omega, you guys, means I have. I have. Echo. Or echo. Or echo. But it means I have. Okay? So, what is the stem for echo? Or echo? And raise your hand if you have the answer. What do you think the stem may be? Josh, go for it, sir. Very good, Josh. That's exactly right. Josh says it's epsilon chi, and he is absolutely right. He is absolutely right. So that being said, I am going to copy and paste everything, and you guys are going to write it. So I'll give you guys a minute to write that out, and then we'll continue on to show you my example.
Hey, Professor.
Yes, sir.
That same stem is used in Hebrew too.
Yes, it is. It is. It's really interesting. I don't know the history of when they started to interweave with one another, but a lot of the behaviors of Hebrew is also in Greek. So it's really cool. It's very cool. Okay? So let's start with that right now. Okay? Now, here's the next step. Here's the next step. Instead of adding the augment first, because that's what's going to do the funny business, I'm going to do the endings next. I'm going to do the endings next. Okay? So the first person singular ending is omicron nu. Okay? And that's not in Greek, so I apologize for that. Omicron nu. I'm going to do the same thing for the third person plural. Okay? And then the second singular is epsilon sigma. Third is epsilon. Plural, just like the present active indicative, omicron mu, epsilon nu. And then epsilon tau, epsilon. Okay? Now, I'm going to add after that our augment. Okay? Epsilon, 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 and epsilon. Okay. Now, I'll just tell you, well, I'll let you guys write it out. So I'll give you guys a minute to write that out. Okay, so when you see this word, just visually speaking, it looks awkward. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look right. That's one of the reasons why the Greeks changed it, okay? But then also when you read it, it's really awkward to actually read it as is, right? So for example, the first person singular, if I read it, it is ekon, and ekes. I sound like a dolphin right now, you know? And for some reason, the Greeks didn't like that. They didn't like sounding like a dolphin. So they changed it. They changed it, okay? And so whenever you have an augment and then the verb that begins with an epsilon or with a vowel per se, okay? What happens is they form together to become an eta. Okay, so all the double.
Yeah, I was just looking at that at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, it sounds funny, doesn't it? But now they try to meld it out. They try to roll with it, and so they changed it into an eta. Okay, This is known as the lengthening of a vowel. Okay? So in essence is when you have an augment next to a vowel, this epsilon, it lengthens that vowel. Okay? And so that the long vowel of it is an eta. So instead of sounding like a dolphin, ekon, you actually sound maybe like a Greek. Akon, akon, akes, ake, akamen, akete, akon. So it's I was having, you were having, you all were having, Charles Barkley was having, we were having. So, okay. So that's what happens whenever you have a verb that begins with an epsilon or a vowel. Okay. So I'll let you guys finish that. And then I'll show you guys the formula of these changes. Okay. So what I have here down here, you guys, are the actual formulas. Okay. So if you'll see here, this first column, these are the augments. Okay. Those are the augments. All right. The second column is or are the vowels that begin a verb. Okay. So that being said, when you have the augment and a vowel that begins with an epsilon, then that changes into an eta. When you have an augment where the vowel begins with an alpha, that becomes an eta. When you have a verb that begins with the diphthong alpha iota, that augment with it becomes an eta with a iota subscript. And then finally, when you have a verb that begins with an omicron with an augment in front of it, it becomes an omega. Okay? So whenever you have these verbs that begin with these vowels, that augment technically lengthens it, but that's what it lengthens to. Etas or an omega. Yes, Leanne.
So does it just come down to memorization to which verbs are the imperfect active indicatives when
Yes.
they get switched?
Yes. Yes, it comes down to memory. And then Tony?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
How would you be able to see the word written out and know that the word starts with an epsilon? Or there's an augment to it?
That's a great question, Tony. Like I said, based on what I provide for you, that's how you know. That's how you'll know. But also, it's just practice. It really is. It's just rote memory and practice. So, the thing with Greek is, it's in many ways kind of like, I don't know if everyone has done this, but you ever did like a Rubik's Cube? A Rubik's Cube? You know how like, as a matter of fact, I actually have one right here. So I have a Rubik's Cube right here, right? Greek in many ways is like a Rubik's Cube where there's different paths to achieve what you want to achieve. So for example, say for example, you have this word acon, and you're not really sure what acon is. So it's just like, okay, there's an eta in front of it. I don't know what that's about. but there's an Omicron nu at the end of it. Now, in my mind, there's two things that I can think of with an Omicron nu. Could it be a noun? Because it can be, right? It can be a noun. It could be a second declension, accusative masculine singular, right? So it's just like, okay, if that is the case, then all I need to do to find it in a dictionary is its lexical form, which is that sigma. So it'd be ACOS. So I go into the dictionary, I find the word ACOS. Oh, rats, I don't see it. Okay, so that one path to the Rubik's Cube just didn't work, you know? So I need to figure out another path, okay? But wait a minute. I do remember this could be an imperfect active indicative ending. So it's a verb, all right? So it's like, okay, if that's that, then that eta to me is like, okay, something's with that eta. I got to figure that out. And then once that happens, then I can find it in a dictionary and figure out, there we go. That's it. So that example that I shared you guys, that narrative example, if you will, that's basically how we do it. That's how translators do it. When they aren't sure of a word, they try things out. They try things out based on what they know. And sooner than later, you will find the right answer. So yeah. Is that a good analogy?
Sort of. So when we, in a test, when we look at a word that's is written out like this and have to find the stem and have to write out the stem for it?
So with a test, good question. With a test, I will provide for you the basics of it. Like, for example, if I give you a word and it's not on the vocabulary, nor is it on the homework, I will give you the lexical form for that. I will give you the gender for that if it's a noun. I'll give you the declension of it if it's a noun. Okay, so that you know how to give me the lexical form of that word, or know what to do and what pattern you need to follow to answer that question. So again, though, if that ever comes up on a test, I will provide you the necessary things to answer it. Okay?
Professor?
Yes.
This is Tammy. I do have a question about what we've been learning. We do the worksheets, and, if we've made errors on the work, how are we going to know what we did wrong?
So I'm working on scanning them right now. I have a scanner, and here's what happened. So one of those responsibilities of that I had that just kind of toppled over this weekend. So one of the things that I did was I used my scanner and try to scan all the homework that I graded, and the scanner said in its own way, I don't like doing this much work anymore, so I'm just going to shut down and completely fry. So needed to say I broke my scanner, and that being said, it didn't communicate with my computer. So everything that I did, all the work that you guys gave me that I scanned, it all disappeared, and it just really, it was one of those kick the laptop kind of days. And so I'm working on right now trying to find a solution to that as quickly as I can. So I will get your guys' work as quickly as possible. So yeah.
Professor,
Yes.
we totally understand. Believe us, we are not disappointed.
Thank you.
We've been experiencing, computer issues, so believe us, we are not impatient at all.
I appreciate that. And like I said, you can definitely use your homework as reference, as resource, and so I will get that to you guys. I've graded them, I put them up on ABHE for those that I've received, and I will get them out to you. So, okay? So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so then let's continue on with the imperfect. I am going to erase everything here and and that I don't want either. And so I'm going now to do the imperfect middle passive, and that's in Greek. The imperfect middle passive indicative, again, I will use the word luo, and that's in English, so I apologize for that. Okay, which doesn't mean I have, but I destroy, all right? So again, let's use the stem. I'm going to erase everything here. Okay, so let's start with the stem. All right, and then after you apply the stem, let's add the augment. All right, so after the augment and after the stem, here are the imperfect middle passive indicative endings. So remember, when I say middle passive, that would convey it's a progressive aspect tense, okay? But these are identical for the middle voice and the passive voice, all right? So for the singular, it is omicron mu, eta nu, eluamane, eluamane. And then the second singular is omicron upsilon, eluu. The third singular is epsilon tau omicron, elueta. And then the plural first is omicron mu, epsilon, theta, alpha, eluometha, eluometha. And then it's epsilon sigma, theta, epsilon, elueste for the second plural. And then finally for the third plural is omicron nu, tau, omicron, eluanta.
Can you pronounce the first person singular again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's eluamane. Eluamane. Okay? So if it was a middle voice, the translation would be, I was destroying myself, or we were destroying ourselves. You were destroying yourself. You were destroying, or you all were destroying yourselves. Charles Barkley was destroying himself, and they were destroying themselves. That's the middle, okay? Passive, the way that we translate it is, I was being destroyed. I was being destroyed. You were being destroyed. Charles Barkley was being destroyed. They were being destroyed, okay? So that's how you translate it, the passive.
Is that third person plural?
That's correct. They were being destroyed is third person plural, exactly. Elilanta. Okay? Any questions? All right. After you finish writing that down, why don't we take a break? Let's take our 30-minute break now. And so we'll come back here at 7:30, depending on where your guys are at. If you're in Florida, I believe it's 8:30. I could be wrong. It's 5:30 here. So just come back here at 30 minutes. I will do roster while you guys are on break, okay? And then yeah. So I'll see you guys in 30 minutes.
It would be 8:30 here, Professor. You're right.
Thank you very much, Josh. I appreciate that. So either 7:30 or 8:30. Come back whenever time zone you're at. Now, my next example is write. What is the past tense for write? And North Texas, I saw your hand up. Is that to answer the question, or did you have a question? No question? Okay. So let me ask that example. What is the past form for the verb write? Like I'm writing something. Go for it, North Texas. Or Patricia? Yeah, go ahead, Patricia. Is my audio working? Or
You're breaking up, Professor.
okay. Thank you for letting me know that.
It would be wrote.
Yeah, very good, Josh. Okay, cool. Thank you. So,
Or would it be written?
that written is a participle form, which we'll talk about later. But it's wrote, isn't it? So it's not writed. It's not writed. It's not like studied or cooked. It's wrote. It's wrote. So why do we have two aorist forms? Because there's two ways of expressing the past form. There's two ways of expressing the past form. There's one way where you just simply add ed at the end of it, or you have to change the word, okay? Just like child and children, men and man, and so forth, okay? So that's why we have two aorist forms. There's two aorist forms, all right? Like I said, there's known as the first aorist and the second aorist, all right? So, but what are the differences between the two aorist forms? The difference is this. The stem remains intact with the first aorist. The stem remains intact for the first aorist. All right, and for the second aorist, the stem changes. Okay, so remember how I told you that the stem is the thing that does not change? Aorist throws us a curveball here, where in the second aorist, the stem actually changes. All right. That also, let me add another thing about the second aorist, and then I'll show you examples of what these forms look like. But another point about the second aorist is this. The second aorist also take imperfect endings. The imperfect tense, it takes those endings. All right. So that's why we have two aorist forms. One more time. The two aorist forms, the reason why we have two of them is because just like in English, we have two different ways of making a verb a past tense, right? In English, we could just add an ed at the end of the word, or we have to change the entire word to convey the past tense of it, okay? And so now let's continue on, and let's go through the aorist. We're going to go through the aorist, okay? So give me 1 second, and I'm going to get my chart out. All right, so what we're going to do now is the first aorist active indicative. The first aorist active indicative, okay? And again, we're going to use our buddy Luo here. We're going to use Luo. I'm going to apply the stem. So start off with that first, okay? So go through it and add the stem to these charts. Oh, and keep in mind, even though I didn't write it down in my presentation, I want you guys to know that if a verb has a first aorist form, it's not going to have a second aorist form, okay? Just like in English, when I say wrote, like I wrote my notes yesterday, I'm not going to say righted. There's no word in the English to convey that kind of past tense, righted. It's simply just wrote, okay? So if a verb has a first aorist form, it's not going to have a second aorist form and vice versa, all right? So just keep that in mind. So when I show you the second aorist, I'm going to show you based on a different example, all right? Okay, so once you add the stem, we also need to add the augment. We also need to add the augment here, okay? And so let's add the epsilon, not the E. We're going to add the augment in front of the stem. Okay, here's the next thing that we're going to do. We're going to add a sigma as well, all right? I know I told you with the future, the only thing that you need to find out is that sigma, okay? This first aorist form has a sigma as well, okay? So in order to identify the first aorist, it needs to have that augment as well as the sigma, okay? So I'm going to add the sigma to this as well. Okay. After that, one of the common vowels of the first aorist is an alpha. Okay? So you'll recognize that the noun endings for these first aorists will have an alpha in them. Okay? Not all of them will, but majority of them will. So let's go and begin. So the first aorist singular, the first singular form, you simply add an alpha after the sigma. Then for the second singular, you add an alpha sigma. All right? Third, you add an epsilon. All right? First person plural is alpha mu epsilon nu at the end of the sigma for the first person plural. Okay? Second person plural is alpha tau epsilon. All right? And then finally, the third person plural is alpha nu. Oh, that's an omega. Sorry. Alpha nu. All right, so this is our first aorist active indicative. I'm going to read them through. If you wish to read them after me, go ahead. So we'll go through the singular and then the plural. And it goes as follows. Elusa, elusas, eluse, elusamin, elusate, and elusan. And then the way that we translate this is I destroyed, you destroyed, we destroyed. So it's just simply the simple past. That's it. We don't add anything to it. It's by default. It just simply happened. Okay? So you all destroyed, they destroyed, Charles Barkley destroyed, and so forth. Okay? So that is our first aorist active indicative. Okay? Now keep in mind, notice that sigma there. That sigma is a counterpart to the aorist. So whenever you have those consonant stops, like the labials, the dentals, and velars, that there's going to be a change there. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right. So the next one that I'm going to do is the first aorist middle indicative, and that's in Greek. I always make that mistake. All right, the first aorist middle indicative. Okay. Now, so we have our stem. So write out your stem, okay? And you also have your epsilon, your augment in front. So write that out. And then you also have your sigma, just like in the active form. So I'm just going to erase the endings right now. So just write that in your notes right now. All right, and then I'm going to add our middle endings to this now. So it's, for the first person singular, it's alpha, mu, eta, nu, elusamine.
Professor?
Yes.
I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just let you know that Trinity and Courtney are back now.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. I noticed that you guys got disconnected on Mega Meeting. Did you guys get disconnected on webinar as well?
No, sir, we're still on webinar, but it's better that way because like our internet connection is really slow, so.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you for letting me know that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that first person singular is alpha, mu, eta, nu, elusamine, okay? And then for the second person singular, it is an omega. It's really weird. It's totally out there, but it is an omega. And the reason why it's an omega, it's because, remember what I told you about the omega vowel? It's a hungry, hungry hippo vowel. It eats whatever it wants. So there was a change there that occurred that has that omega, okay? The third person singular is alpha, tau, omicron, elusato. Then the first person plural is alpha, mu, epsilon, theta, alpha, elusamatha. Second person plural is alpha, sigma, theta, epsilon, elusaste. And then finally, the third person plural is alpha, nu, alpha, nu, tau, omicron, elusanta. Okay, so this specifically is for the middle voice, specifically, okay? And so the way that we translate it is I destroyed myself, or we destroyed ourselves, or Charles Barkley destroyed himself, okay? I only use Charles Barkley because he's kind of cool to me. I think he's okay. And then Elusanto is they destroyed themselves.
Professor, could you just give us 1 minute?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for letting me know.
Professor,
Yes.
quick question. So this chart that we have right in front of us, that's first aorist, middle indicative, right?
Yes, correct.
And then the one before it, what was that?
So that's pretty much when the subject is doing the action. So it's simply I destroyed, or
Okay.
you destroyed, and we destroyed, and so forth. So yeah. Leanne?
So it's,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Brianne.
no, you're fine. I was just going to say, so that's still first aorist, middle indicative as well. It's just when the subject is doing the action.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Leanne, you have a question? Okay, so someone has on their noteboard Theos. Or was that me? Did I do that a long time ago? I might have done that a long time ago. Mega Meeting's acting quirky right now. It's tripping me out. But Leanne, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, sir. You actually entered it.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Okay, may I continue on? Okay, so I'm going to do the second aorist next. So I'm going to do the second aorist active indicative. And like I said, because you have verbs, if it's in first aorist, it's not going to be a second aorist and vice versa. So I have to pick another verb that's a second aorist and purely a second aorist, okay? So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use LAPO. And the way that you spell LAPO, you guys, is lambda, epsilon, iota, or iota, pi, omega. LAPO. And LAPO means I put or I place. I put or I place. Minus the K. Okay, so as I told you guys, the difference between the first aorist and the second aorist is this. The major difference is that the stem changes. The stem changes. So the stem here, it's pure stem, is lambda, epsilon, iota, pi, right? Okay. For this particular form, the stem changes where that epsilon disappears, okay? So I'm going to delete all that. And so what we have for the second aorist is lambda, iota, pi. And that's lip. I apologize for that. Lambda, iota, pi, okay? So as you notice, in comparison from the pure stem, the epsilon's gone, okay? Now I have to warn you, it's not always that simple. It is not always that simple. Unfortunately, a lot of verbs go through drastic changes, and I'll show you a list of 5 of the major ones that go through the drastic changes, okay? So there's lip. Lip is our stem, the changed stem for the second aorist, okay? So the reason why I want to show you guys this is, again, is to let you know that the behavior of the second aorist is that it changes its stem. It changes its stem, okay? Other than that, we need to add, we're going to add the augment in front of it, okay? Well, before I do that, I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to place this in every box, okay? And then I'm going to add the augment in front of it. Oops. Okay, and then the second distinct clue about the second aorist is basically the second aorist take the imperative endings. The imperative endings. So if it's the aorist active, I'm going to place the imperative active endings on this, okay, which I'm going to do right now.
Professor?
Yes, so the first distinction of the second aorist is that the stem changes, right? The stem changes completely. Okay, the second distinction after that is that the second aorist takes the imperfect endings. And so this is the aorist active. So all I'm doing is adding the imperfect active endings to this stem. Okay, and so the translation here is, well, let me read it. And again, if you wish to read it after me, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so let me go through the singular and then I'll go through the plural. Elipon, elipon, elipes, elipe, elipamen, elipete, and elipan. It's beautiful. It sounds like Greek prayers in a quiet church. So well done, well done. So that being said, the way that we translate this is I placed, or you placed, or we placed, or Charles Barkley placed. But the major difference is that the second aorist changes its stem. Okay. So, all right, and then let me do the middle. Let me do the middle for you guys. Okay, and like I said, just like with the active, all you need to do is attach those imperfect endings. I'm going to do the imperfect middle passive endings on this. Okay, that they just borrow it. Okay, so let me do that. And that's very wrong. Okay, so these are the second aorist middle indicative forms, and the way that we translate them is I placed myself, you placed yourself, and so again, it's the action referring back to the subject. We placed ourselves. You all placed yourselves. So, okay, so that's how you translate that. But like I said, all you do with the second aorist is you attach the imperfect endings to them. Okay? Questions or comments? Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Professor?
I mean, yes, sir. Go ahead.
On that first person plural, how would we say it?
Yes, the way that we say this word is elipometha. Elipometha.
I mean, translated in English.
In English, we would say we placed ourselves, or we. What's the past for put? Put? I guess it's still put. We put ourselves.
Then I thought we were. Yeah.
ready, Professor.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that. And so now I'm going to show you some examples of some really crazy second aorist forms. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so here's some second aorist forms that are very prevalent in the New Testament. One is erchomai. Erchomai is to come or to go. That let me get a pen. This here is its second aorist form. I know what you're thinking. How did that happen? Where is all this change? I have no idea. I really have no idea. That's just, again, I really feel they knew somehow, the Greeks knew somehow that we were going to learn this language, and they're just snickering in their deathbed, just realizing how much of a twisted humor that they have. So that is their second aorist form, aelthon, okay? So erchomai to aelthon. Again, I have no idea, all right? Another example is ginomai. Ginomai means to become or to happen or to be. And this here is its second aorist form, egenamein, okay? So maybe not so much of a change, okay? Instead of that iota, okay, we have that epsilon, right? Okay? Another example I provide for you, lambano. Lambano is to take or to receive, okay? And so in lambano, what we have is the stem of lambano, the pure stem, is that, right? But you notice that lambano, in its second aorist form, scrunches up to just lambda alpha beta, okay? So that's what I mean about how the stem changes. It could just be one letter in the entire stem that changes, or it could be a major change, a total change, or it could just be a super change, you know? So this is how the second aorist behaves, all right? I give you two more examples of this. Another one is blepo. Blepo has adon, and again, I have no idea. I have no idea where they got that. But that is its second aorist form, adon. And blepo means to see, okay? Lego, it's not the toy, but it's actually a verb. It's to speak or to say, Lego, okay? And that second aorist form is apon, okay? Again, what? You know, I have no idea, but that's just what it is, so.
Professor,
Yes.
when you're pronouncing the omicron and the alpha, what's
Yes.
the difference?
Yeah, you know, back in the day when they were wearing togas, Mike, there probably was a very minute difference, but the way that I'm pronouncing it, it's very similar. It's extremely similar. So much so that it just for the sake of the argument, it's probably just the same sound.
Okay.
Okay. So going back to, I forgot who shared this, but when they want to identify second aorist or how do you know if this is a verb or not and so forth, because I showed you guys these examples, like expect them on the final or expect them on the test, you know, and so yeah, okay.
Professor, we got another question for you.
Yes, go ahead. I may not have heard the question.
Oh, okay, all right, you hear us now?
Yes, go ahead. Now I don't. I'm sorry.
Can you hear us, Professor?
Yes, I can hear you guys now.
So with those changes in those words, with the change over to the words, then you would add the first, second, or third?
So great question. So basically, so like I said, this is the second aorist form, right? This here is your stem, that iota delta. That is your stem. This here is the augment, okay? And then this omicron nu is the stem, is the verb ending, okay? So you don't attach another verb ending to it. You just attach it after that delta, for example. Okay, same thing here. Now, the reason why we have this eta, you guys, is because it begins with an epsilon, okay? And then it has the augment. So remember how I told you if it begins with that vowel, it lengthens it? So that's what's happening with the eta there. But this here ends it. That's where it ends it. And then again, this is your verb ending. So you need to add there, or you need to replace that with whatever verb ending that you need to replace it with, whether it be a third plural or a first plural or a second singular. Okay?
Professor.
Yes?
I can see these policies.
Professor,
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, our internet, we're having bad internet problems, and we did not hear a single word you said. It was just cutting out.
Okay. All right. Let's pray. Let's pray that it won't cut out this time. So what we have here, let me erase all this actually so that we won't have major chicken scratch going on. Okay. So let's go back to blepo. All right. The second aorist form for blepo is adon. Adon. Okay. The iota delta is your stem in the second aorist. Is the stem in the second aorist. This epsilon is that augment. Okay? The omicron nu is the verb ending. All right? And so you don't want to add to this entire word the verb ending for whatever reason that you need, like whether it's a third person plural and so forth. You need to replace this part with whatever person and number that you want to add, whether it's a first person plural or a third person plural and so forth. Okay, so you take that noun ending off and then attach it, attach the other the appropriate one in. Okay, now I mentioned about aelthon. The reason why we have an eta here is because it's hidden. It merged together. It changed. There is an actual augment. Okay, but it began with an epsilon. Okay. And so the stem here is that epsilon lambda theta, okay? And one more time, you have that verb ending. You take that verb ending out for whatever appropriate one, like, for example, first person plural. So it will be aelth-omitha, not aelth-on-omitha, but aelth-omitha, okay? Did I cut on that?
Not at all, Professor. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Could you tell me the stem of the second word there?
Yes, absolutely. This for genomine or genomine. The stem will be gamma epsilon nu.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And then I'm just going to go for all of them because I feel on a roll right now. So the next one is lambda alpha beta, okay? And then Lego is iota pi. All right. Cool beans?
Professor?
Yes, go ahead, Leanne.
Sorry. So when you have the augment and the iota, how would you, can you say that next to blepo?
Oh, okay, so for blepo?
Yes.
Okay, so basically the way that I read it, well, I'll just do Lego because there's not a whole lot of chicken scratch on Lego. Basically the way I read it is I make this into a diphthong, That's a diphthong, the way that I read it. So it's apon, apon. Okay? So you don't pronounce it separately. Now, it's not eipon, it's apon.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thinking. Let's see. Should I finish the indicative? No, we can't finish the indicative. We're going to stop with the indicative right now, and I'm going to introduce to you guys participles. Okay? So, so that being said, I will definitely have to change the Greek exam because it's not going to go over imperatives, nor infinitives, nor subjunctives. Okay? So I do have to change that. In regards to the nouns, they're pretty much going to be the same. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But I will have to change the exam, and so that for anyone who took the exam already, if you could just stay after class, I would like to talk to you guys. Okay, so so yeah, so then let's go straight into participles now. We're gonna go straight into participles. So when I post this presentation up, I placed everything on it. Okay, so it's just please be selective based on what we learned. So when you use your presentation for your test, you'll know where to go and so forth. So let's do participles, okay? And you don't want to get all that right now. So what is a participle? So just follow me point by point, all right? A participle is a verbal adjective. It is a verbal adjective. So it's basically it's the child of a verb and an adjective. They found each other at a coffee shop, they talked, and then they really enjoyed their time together, and they realized, oh, we should get married, and then boom, you have the verbal adjective, which is the participle, okay? And so, so what is a participle? A participle, well, let's start off with a verb, run, okay? The default participle form is running. You add the ing towards the end of a verb, running, okay? And the way that we use it is basically the way that we use as an adjective. So the running man, or the running woman, okay? So instead of using an adjective noun to describe another noun, we're basically using a verb to describe something, okay? So that is what a participle is, okay? Here's the problem with participles. Basically what participles are in the Greek is you have your verb stem, but instead of a verb ending, you have noun endings attached to the verb stem. That's the problem. That is the problem, okay? And this is where students in Greek, when they learn to read Greek, this is where it makes or breaks the student, okay? Because I think if I remember correctly, 40% of the entire New Testament is comprised of participles, okay? So it's a major part of the New Testament. So knowing participles is a very important thing to do, okay? And so, like I said, that is the major characteristic of participles. You have a verb stem, but you attach noun endings to the verb stem, okay? Participles you parse. You parse participles, okay? And so when you parse participles, okay, you give me the following in this order. You give me the tense, and you have three choices for the tense: progressive, aorist, or perfect. I am not going to show you perfect, okay? So the only tenses you need to know is the progressive and the aorist tense, okay? Then you have voice. And voice, you only have three choices: active, middle, or passive, okay? After that, you have mood, and you only have one answer for mood. It is a participle, okay? That's all you put down for mood, participle, okay? And then the noun part of it is case, gender, and number. You got to give me the case, which is either nominative, dative, genitive, or accusative, okay? We haven't run away from them. They're going to come back. They're like the bad penny, okay? Cases will always come back. Gender, is it masculine or feminine or neuter? and then number. Is it singular or plural? Okay? So when you parse participles, I'm looking for these 6 things. All right? Questions about that? Okay. So then let me oh, yes, there is a hand up though. Go for it, Leanne.
So, Professor, when we're working with participles, is it only when parsing them that we will use tenses for the voice, the mood, the case, the gender, and the number?
Yes, it's only for participles that we do all those things. So it's like a combination of verbs. So we're going to do the tense, voice, and mood, and then case, gender, and number. Only participles do that. Okay? All right. So let's talk about progressive participles. Let's do progressive participles. All right? And let me erase all that. Erase all drawings. All right. So I'm going to talk about progressive active participles, how they behave, and then I'll show you guys the chart afterward. But because of the fact that we have masculine participles, feminine participles, neuter participles, it's going to be a lot of stuff. It's going to be a lot of stuff, okay? So I want to teach you guys the behavior so that you know from that what the forms will look like, okay? So let's do the progressive active participles first, okay? Progressive active participles, they are masculine. For the masculine and neuter, we follow the third declension, okay? So for masculine and neuter gender participles, we follow the third declension, okay? The feminine follows the first declension. Okay, so for the progressive, we need to remember the third declension. Okay, so we need to keep that in mind. In regards to the progressive middle passive participles, all right, there's something known as a tense formative. And what a tense formative is, it's kind of similar to a stem. It's the part of it that's not the stem that remains the same in all its forms, okay, which I'll show you in the chart. Okay, so basically with this tense formative, omicron, mu, epsilon, nu, you have the stem, then you have the amen, and then you have the declensional endings. Okay, so for the masculine and neuter, it's the stem plus amen plus second declension endings. And then for the feminine, it will always follow the first declension. This is the beautiful thing about feminine, okay? That's why I praise feminine, right? Is because feminine makes everything so easy. We just revert back to the first declension. So thank you, feminine. Okay, so one more time for the progressive middle passive, the masculine and neuter follow the second, feminine follow first. All right? So that's how it behaves. That's how it behaves. Okay? What I'm going to do next, what I'm going to show you guys right now is basically the progressive active participles. All right? Now, due to time, I mean, I would love for you guys to write them down, but due to time, I want to show you majority of the participles that I can, okay? So I'm going to show you the chart. I'm going to show you how they behave, and then we'll just continue on, okay? So for this one, this is the progressive active participle for our buddy Luo, okay? So let us go now, all right? So like I said, masculine and neuter, third declension, right? And so what we have here is we have the stem, lu, okay? And then following that, we have the third declension endings. Ontos, onti, onta, ontes, ontone, usi, and ontos. Okay? The only difference for the masculine is the omega nu. That is the only different one. Because on the regular third declension pattern, the nominative singular would just simply be a sigma, right? We don't have a sigma here. Okay? So this is the only exception in comparison to the third declension that I showed you. All right? But everything else, all the endings are the same. All right? Now, for the feminine, what we have here is the stem, okay? And then after the stem, we have this omicron upsilon sigma that occurs in all the forms, okay? So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay? And then all it is simply the first declension endings. Yes, Joseph, go ahead.
What was your description of this word, Professor?
The description? I'm not sure. What do you mean by description? Like what it is specifically?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It is the progressive active participle for luo.
Yes, sir.
Was that? Did I answer your question?
Could you repeat that again, Professor? You cut out.
Yes, definitely. It is the progressive active participle for the verb luo. Okay, and so now what's the translation for this word? Technically, it's destroying or loosing. That's what it technically is. Remember, it's not a pure verb. We're not using it as a verb, okay? We're using it more as an adjective to describe a noun, okay? So depending on the noun's case, gender, and number, we apply this word to that noun because it has to agree in case, gender, and number. So it's like the loosing man or the loosing woman or the loosing kingdom or the destroying king or something like that. So like I said, translation, all of it is destroying or loosing. It just depends on how we use it now in a sentence. Okay? Yes, Tony, do you have a question, sir? No, I would, I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you going to have this slide on Moodle so we can reference?
Yes, absolutely. I will have this slide on Smoodle for reference. Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, and then I'm going to show you now I'm going to show you now the middle passive, the progressive middle passive. All right. So what we have here again, we have our stem. Luo for luo. We have our stem in all these forms, right? Okay. And then we have this thing called the tense formative. This thing that doesn't change. It's not the stem. It's not the stem, but it doesn't change, right? On all the forms, it doesn't change. Okay? And then finally, after the end of amen, you just add, not third, come on, Simon. You add second for, and this is for the middle passive. You add the second declension endings for the masculine and neuter, and then the feminine for the first. If you want to add the first declension to the feminine. Yes, Leanne.
So The almond part of the word, does that not change at all?
It does
when
not
you're using
change
it
at all.
for any other word, or is it just for this?
Exactly. For every verb that will be a middle passive progressive participle, it will not change. It will always be there. Okay. We are pretty much out of time. I don't think I have any time to show you guys the aorist. I would like for you guys to utilize your notes to locate the aorist, because this is what I'm going to do. Every aorist question that I have on the exam will be bonus. Okay? So so just keep that in mind. But basically, I'm just testing you all the way up to this point, which is the participle, the progressive, active, middle passive participles. Okay? Is there any questions before we leave?
Are we going to have a lot of time on the test?
You're going to have all the time that you want. I'm sorry, let me answer Mike's question first. It's a take-home test. It's a take-home test. So just like you guys did the worksheet, do it the same way. It's open book, open note, open homework, open everything. I'll even take a stab and say you can do open online, but got to be careful with that, because, you know, a lot of people say whatever they want to say online, you know. But if you have a Greek master at your church, you can utilize that Greek master. So you just can't use me. That's all I'm saying, okay? So, but yeah, it's open book, open everything, and you can take it as long as you need to. Just turn it in on the due date, which I'm thinking probably will be probably next Friday or something, okay? Yes, North Texas.
So there's a place to just download the final? Or the midterm? Sorry.
Yes, there will be a place that will that you will be able to download it. You know that location that you saw, Mike, where it was the upload? That's where it's supposed to be. So yeah. I will have it there.
Okay. Do you know, is that going to be today or tomorrow or
it's
Thursday?
It's definitely not going to be today. It'll probably be no later than Thursday. Okay.
Sounds good, Professor. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Mike. Question from North Texas.
Yeah, my question is, like, just over some of the stuff that you went over today before we even take the exam, like if we needed help just kind of going over, because there was a lot of stuff that just really went over my head. Like, the whole
okay. So would you like to meet? Would you like to meet before you take the exam, or would? Well, I guess during the time. I mean, how would I know? So would you like to meet and ask those questions?
Well, I mean, you would probably know if we met on a mega meeting and you saw that my hands weren't really writing. I'm just saying maybe go over some things. Like I had a lot of questions.
Sure.
All the time, you
know? Okay, yeah, we can definitely go through that. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do that tonight, but if you want to do it on another day, just hit me up and give me, like, when you're free, and then we can meet up.
Okay, can I text you? Because usually when I email you, you don't really get back to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then, yeah, you can text me.
Okay. Professor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, one more question. Is it due a week from this Friday or this Friday?
It'll be due a week from this Friday.
Okay. Yay, thank you.
No problem. And Leanne, go ahead.
I was just going to ask when the exam would need to be turned in, if it was going to be Friday or the same day just before class.
It'll be next Friday.
Thank you.
Okay. And North Texas, go ahead.
TJ wanted to know if we take out for a good the House of Prime Rib, you'll just pass us.
There you go. I think this is where I feel that the forces that be will use something to affirm my identity to do something that is not right. And so, oh man, I sure would like that, but I just don't. I don't think it would be quite enjoyable if I do.
I'm sorry, Professor, we do have some backslid students.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all, love covers a multitude of sin, and I love you guys. So.
All right, thank you, Professor. Can you say some more?
All right. God bless you guys. And is there anyone else that have questions? Yes, Leanne, go ahead.
All right. So, what do you want to happen since I already took?
Yeah. So, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I just think that it might be a little too advantageous if I grade it for you already. And so, I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking what I could do that I find in my mind that is fair, and let me think what you're thinking about this, is I can basically grade both, you know, or like I said, you can use yours as a reference, you know, because not a whole lot of things will change, you know, but I can grade both, and then what I can do is I can average them out for you, you know what I'm saying, from the two, so that you could either get a better grade or an enhanced grade, you know? What do you think about that?
I think that works.
Okay.
It's just I was kind of confused on the passage part of the.
Right. Yeah, so there's a lot of things on the passage part. Well, you know, I haven't looked at it for a while now, but there's certain things, like the noun stuff for the passage, that's still there. I'm still going to keep those, you know, but the verb stuff is actually, I had to change, I think. So that's another reason why I feel that you could get another chance at it, you know, and I really think that you'll probably do better the second time around.
Okay, sounds good, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, you're quite welcome, Leanne.